I'm Morgan Wellington, 30 years old, founder and CEO of a luxury hotel brand that spans 3 continents and 15 properties, and a daughter who learned the hard way that some people would rather defend their expectations than acknowledge your reality. The morning everything snapped into focus, my phone lit up with a neat little sentence from my father. "You're not welcome in our 5-star hotel." Actually laughed. Their 5-star hotel. Then I opened our internal console and spoke the words I never imagined I'd say about my own parents. "Security, please revoke the Wellington family's VIP access. Effective midnight." If you've ever been told you don't belong in a room you built with your own hands, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Tap like so this reaches someone who needs the nudge, and subscribe if you want the whole story, because what follows isn't just payback. It's about rewriting the rules of belonging. From the outside, my childhood in Wellesley looked glossy. A white-trimmed colonial lawn, stripes crisp as a golf course, my mother's pearls catching the light at every charity gala, my father's name appearing in business pages whenever a merger closed. Inside, our house ran on a syllabus of status: law, medicine, finance, respectable paths, hospitality. As my father said with the reflex of a man who'd never made a bed he didn't sleep in, a servant's profession. Meanwhile, the thing that made my pulse quicken was the choreography of a great hotel lobby. Bell carts gliding without collisions, phones ringing in counterpoint, a concierge typing with the wrists of a pianist and welcoming a guest with the warmth of a friend. "Morgan, stop pestering the staff," my mother would chide, linking her arm through mine and steering me away. "They're busy. Busy making magic," I thought, trying to memorize how it worked. I collected hotel ephemera the way other kids collected concert stubs. Key cards, tiny linen paper notepads, the weighty pens that made every signature feel like a vow. When we traveled, I'd map the property in my head: where the draft sighed when the revolving door slowed, which elevator lagged half a second before the doors bit shut, where a table should be moved 3 inches to stop the traffic bottleneck at breakfast. "It's a phase," my father told my mother when they thought I couldn't hear. "She'll grow out of it." I grew into it. High school was a ledger of predictable hits: straight A's, debate captain, newspaper editor. But unless the headline read future attorney, applause didn't materialize. I won a regional essay prize for reimagining service as a luxury of attention, and Dad didn't look up from his brief. "That's nice," he said. "Focus on political science. It will help in law school." The real collision came application season. They circled Harvard, Yale, Columbia. I circled Cornell's hotel school, quietly stuffed the manila envelope myself, and waited. When the thick acceptance arrived, my hands shook the way lobbies tremble before a storm. "This isn't the path for a Wellington," Dad said, measured like a verdict. "It's the path for this Wellington," I answered, surprising us both. The ultimatum followed: study what they chose or pay my own way. I chose the second option, and an entire new life. The next 4 years were an exercise in endurance. Mornings stacked with operations classes and service design labs. Afternoons tutoring French verbs to the sons of hedge fund managers. Nights at the front desk of a local boutique property where the heating moaned like a sleep talker and the elevator had a personality disorder. Weekends waiting tables while I memorized the wine list as if it were scripture. Holidays were phone calls timed between other people's dinners. The clink of cutlery through the receiver, my mother's careful "how's school?" before a segue to my brother's moot court victory. They didn't come to graduation. Thomas's law ceremony landed the same weekend. "You understand," my mother said. I understood something: the difference between conditional attention and genuine interest. Standing in the crowd alone, I promised myself that someday the ignoring would be impossible. My first job: front desk associate at the Archer in Midtown, a boutique property that smelled faintly of cedar and ambition. I shared a walk-up in Queens with 2 other grads and tracked laundry quarters like investments. The pay was just north of minimum. The responsibility felt like a private island. I learned to read faces before they finished a sentence, to sense which guest needed an upgrade and which needed the reassurance of familiarity, to fix a reservation that the system insisted didn't exist while smiling like the system was a dear, slightly confused friend. 6 months in, a guest arrived with the weather in his voice and a problem with his room: connecting door noise, a schedule that couldn't tolerate imperfection. My colleague froze. I stepped in, found a quiet corner in a fully booked house, comped the right amenity without insulting his pride, and sent him up with a bellman who could turn a long hallway into a welcome parade. He left a thank you note addressed to whoever was actually running this hotel. Catherine Reynolds, Pinnacle's regional director, watched it unfold from the lobby. "That was art," she said afterward. "What's your name?" Catherine became my mentor, then my North Star. She invited me into meetings where budgets and reputations pivoted, asked for my take on service pain points as if my answer could alter AP and AMP, and handed me problems that didn't belong to my title. When the booking system imploded during Fashion Week, overbooking us by 30 rooms, I worked the phones until my ears felt laminated, finding partners, shuttles, midnight pastries, reassurances. At 8 a.m., Catherine promoted me to assistant manager. I called home, voice bright. "Assistant manager," I said. Dad chuckled. "Still playing hotel," he said. "When will you get serious?" I hung up and learned how to cry and reapply lipstick in under 10 minutes. Catherine sent me to Chicago when a gorgeous property with the bones of an heiress and the revenue of a cautionary tale needed a turnaround. "You'll face resistance," she warned. "They like the way things are." "That's the problem," I said, boarding the plane. I watched guests leave at 8:05 every morning, latte cups like armor, and built a campaign that spoke in their language. We reimagined the lobby as a living room for people who didn't have time to go home, reopened the bar at 11 a.m. with a menu of meetings in disguise, trained staff to treat a laptop as a VIP and a dead battery as a 5-alarm fire. We added a 24-minute ironing service because that's the exact time between a calendar alert and a pitch across town. Within 9 months, occupancy rose 40%, RevPAR led the market, and exit surveys read like love letters. The CEO noticed. So did I. The usefulness of being underestimated. That winter, I stopped asking my parents to see me. I started seeing what I could build. I kept a private document on my laptop titled "Someday," a blueprint for acquiring and revitalizing tired beauties, hotels with good bones and bad luck. I taught myself to read debt like a novel and a neighborhood like a forecast. At night, I would list every friction point I'd seen as a junior and write the corresponding ritual to dissolve it. A bellman who knows the weight of relief when a traveler arrives 12 minutes before a call. A night auditor trained to solve a problem without waking a manager. Turn down that felt like someone thought of you before you remembered to think of yourself. When Catherine finally introduced me to a circle of investors, people with a weakness for operational discipline and a hunger for a narrative, I walked them through a pro forma where attention is the primary currency. "We don't chase trend," I said. "We build rituals that turn strangers into regulars." They offered $5 million for an initial property. I bought a once grand hotel in Providence whose marble sighed with history and whose balance sheets moaned. I walked its corridors with the building engineer, tapping plaster with my knuckles, listening for hollow places, listening for where the future could fit. Renovation turned me into someone who never quite removed the dust from her hair. I learned to speak general contractor, to fight for an original banister that could charm a travel writer, to negotiate with an electrician who had already decided 50 outlets was adequate. I spent mornings with the finance team, afternoons on scaffolding, evenings interviewing a pastry chef who believed a croissant could persuade a skeptic. We opened with a lobby that smelled faintly of citrus and quiet victory. The first week, we comped a rain-soaked wedding party when their venue flooded. By morning, we'd rearranged the ballroom and their gratitude made the local paper. We hit profitability 3 months early. Grace, our opening GM, texted me at 2:07 a.m. "You were right about the corner chairs. People make decisions there. Success breeds belief." We acquired a second property, then a third. I wrote the Wellington Standard, our culture playbook that starts with "make people feel seen" and ends with "no one leaves at checkout, they carry us." Somewhere in that ascent, the press found me. Rising star in hospitality. I bought a black dress that looked like a yes and stood on a stage with a microphone that flickered on the first syllable of my last name. My parents attended, for Thomas's sake, I assumed. He had a client in the audience. After my speech, my mother kissed the air near my cheek. "We're proud of you," she said. "Though it's time to think about settling down." Dad checked his watch. The after-party wasn't his jurisdiction. "Nice speech," he said. "Is there money in all this?" I smiled like a person collecting data. The answer was yes. The answer never satisfied them. When Pinnacle CEO announced his retirement, the portfolio shuddered, properties too large to pivot fast, rituals weathered by repetition. I used the credibility I had earned and the cash flow I had created to attempt the ridiculous. Acquire the entire thing, fold it under a new banner, infuse it with the Wellington standard. Lawyers told me where the cliffs were. I jumped without falling. Overnight. No, over 18 ferociously strategic months. We rebranded 15 properties across 3 continents. New linen specs, new scent signatures, a whisper of bergamot in New York, a sea salt citrus blend in Lisbon. New staff training that included a module called How to Notice. People think luxury is a chandelier. Luxury is the feeling of not having to ask. We hired on values, not just resumes. We practiced conflict in training rooms so it wouldn't blow up in lobbies. We moved night audit's desk closer to the front, so fear didn't get a hallway to grow in. We wrote tiny scripts for the moments that turn a visit into a memory. A doorman who remembers the running route you liked 3 months ago. A housekeeper who notices the book you left open and leaves a note. Chapter 17 is my favorite too. We taught managers to walk the property like gardeners, pruning what drains attention so attention can bloom. Revenue followed. Not because we chased it, but because attention has a way of compounding. By 30, I had a personal driver who insisted on calling me boss and a therapist who insisted on calling me Morgan. Both were correct in different rooms. You should know I wasn't lonely for lack of people. My days were a sequence of faces, my calendar a quilt of names. But there is a particular ache when the person who should clap first keeps checking a different scoreboard. I installed apartments in New York, London, and Singapore, and in none of them did I sleep more than 6 hours. Our loyalty program acquired members you read about in gossip columns. People proposed in our gardens, reconciled in our bars, wrote novels in our armchairs. I would pause by the banister and feel something hot under my ribs. Joy for them. A sting for the girl who used to take notes on lobbies. About then, my sister Jessica texted, he proposed. Spring wedding? Would love you as a bridesmaid if your hotel stuff allows time off. Miss you. The phrase your hotel stuff made me laugh into my espresso. I said yes so quickly my assistant, Elena, asked if my phone had been stolen. 2 weeks later, Mom and Dad are booking the Wellington in Boston for the wedding. Funny coincidence, right? It's gorgeous. They still didn't know. Somehow, a name in lights hadn't penetrated the family vocabulary. I considered telling them and didn't. Let them fall in love with what I built on its own terms, I thought. Let the reveal happen when pride is already in the room. That was the plan. Plans, like table layouts, are suggestions until people arrive. Before we get there, I have to tell you about the standard we built. Not because it wins awards, it does, but because it explains why the next part hurt as much as it did. The Wellington Standard is a manual disguised as a love letter to attention. It starts with, greet by name if you know it, greet as if you wish you did if you don't. It has a section called Invisible Fixes, things a guest never knows went wrong because they never feel wrong. It teaches a posture that says, I'm here if you need me, and a discretion that says, you don't have to. It tells the story of the time a bellman in Lisbon jogged 4 blocks in the rain to return a child's stuffed fox and came back with a fox cookie from the bakery next door because the fox deserved a snack after the adventure. It explains why we replaced lobby chandeliers with lighting that makes people feel like their best friend just opened the door. It's 1,000 tiny decisions that add to one big feeling. You belong here. If this story resonates, tell me in the comments what being seen looks like for you. Tap like if you believe attention is a form of love. And subscribe, because in the middle of all this, there's a rehearsal dinner, a bottle of Bordeaux, and a sentence I never imagined reading from my father on the most important weekend of my sister's life. Not everything in our world is lavender-scented excellence. We've had pipe bursts at 3 a.m., a rooftop garden that attracted bees we didn't invite, a software migration that nearly taught me to swear in 3 new languages. I learned to say, that's on me, even when it wasn't, because leadership is absorbing heat so your people can keep working. I promoted from within until HR scolded me to look outside more often. Then I did both. I invited Catherine to be my COO and she accepted like a queen going to battle. We built a finance team that could tell me without flinching when a dream cost more than it returned. I told them to code a line item called delight and justify it only through stories. They thought I was kidding. Then the guests wrote us letters about the fox cookie and the way our night auditor remembered to add honey to chamomile because a guest's throat was sore. The spreadsheet learned to listen. At home, the phone calls stayed superficial. My mother could identify the social committee chair of every gala in Boston. She could not name my general manager in Providence. the woman who turned a failing banquet operation into a profit center through nothing but grit and a spreadsheet. My father measured success in billable hours and courtroom victories. The idea that a thank you note attached to a profitable banquet could count as a win did not scan. My brother, kind in the absent-minded way of men with schedules that eclipse family dinners, called to ask if I knew anyone at the Wellington, Chicago, who could upgrade a client. I might, I said, eyes smiling at the nearest camera. We took over Boston, a Back Bay property whose bones had kept me up in college nights, dreaming of a bar where deals felt inevitable and mornings felt kind. Renovation was a negotiation between past and possible. We peeled away decades of beige to reveal a staircase that made people slow down without knowing why. We learned that the room everyone photographed wasn't the one with the chandelier. It was the corner with the green velvet chair, where the light hit like a soft verdict. Press wrote about the Wellington touch, as if the touch were a thing. It's not. It's a practice. Listen, learn, repeat, refine. It's also refusing to define luxury as exclusion. Our version invites you into a story and hands you a line. By the time I turned 30, the numbers were the kind that silence a room. Valuation north of $1 billion. 15 properties humming. An org chart that looked like a small city. I celebrated with half a glass of champagne and a spreadsheet because old habits keep you company. Elena tried to lure me to a rooftop party and I said I had a 7 a.m. with legal about a licensing holdout in Singapore. You're allowed to be a person, she said. Later, I promised. Later is a place workaholics never quite arrive. I wish I could say the next part surprised me. It didn't. It stung anyway. 2 weeks after Jessica asked me to be her bridesmaid, I received an internal alert. Large block booking at Wellington, Boston. Client name Wellington family. Event. Ceremony plus reception. I called Marcus, our general manager, who runs a hotel the way a conductor runs a symphony. They don't know, he asked. No, I said. Please don't reveal it. Treat them as you would any family, our guest family. He didn't flinch. Understood. They toured the property with Alicia from events. I watched on the feed not because I'm a voyeur, but because I am a builder who cannot not look. My parents examined the lobby like jurors. Smaller than online, my mother said. The floral arrangements, our weekly collaboration with a local shop, were a bit ostentatious, my father observed. I texted Alicia. Offer the celebration package at standard rates. Comes with upgrades that could make a planner blush. They asked for special menu items, room upgrades for 24 relatives, extended hours, custom chair sashes in a very specific not quite ivory that exists only when you pay extra. We said yes so many times my accountant texted a question mark. I texted back a fox emoji and a heart. He knew what that meant. Sometimes you spend love like currency. A week before the wedding, a rehearsal dinner unearthed the seam we'd all been pretending didn't exist. A sommelier served an excellent wine at a temperature 2 degrees north of ideal. My father treated the young man like a defective appliance. Get me the manager, he said, loud enough that even the breadsticks stood at attention. I stepped in without thinking, forgot my bridesmaid dress was upstairs and my badge was in a drawer. Is there a problem? I asked, calm as a lobby in good light. This isn't your concern, Dad said. I want the owner. The owner was standing in front of him. I swallowed the reveal because the rehearsal wasn't a battleground. It was my sister's eve. I asked Marcus for a bottle from my private collection, a 82 that makes conversations nicer, and we salvaged the evening with tannins and grace. I went to bed composing the speech I'd never wanted to give. The words hovered in my mind like a storm building on the horizon, waiting for the morning to break. What I didn't know then was how close we were to the moment when tradition and truth would finally collide, when one message on a screen would feel like a verdict. And if you've ever sat at a family table feeling like the odd one out, I want you to hear this now. You're not a misfit, you're a prototype. What they don't see in you today might be the very thing they lean on tomorrow. Drop a comment with the smallest place you've made better just because you noticed it. It might inspire someone else. Tap like if you believe attentiveness is its own kind of power. And don't forget to subscribe because what happened next began with 8 words I never thought I'd say. Security, please revoke the Wellington family's VIP access. The morning of Jessica's wedding arrived with weather so cooperative it felt professionally staged. Blue sky lacquered onto the city. A breeze you could set a table by. From my suite I could see the public garden wake up. runners skimming along the pond, a bridal party taking test photos on the bridge, tourists arguing gently about which swan boat was more photogenic. It should have been a day that ran on momentum and joy. Instead, my phone lit up like a switchboard. Ballroom reset demanded. Father directing staff. Timeline in jeopardy. Read Marcus's first message. A second followed before I could respond. Your mother rejected the florals on delivery. Requests out-of-season orchids. Vendor says impossible. A third. Premium bar revisions. They want brands we do not stock. They're threatening to reconsider the venue. At 11 a.m. I stood very still and watched the city move under me, then walked to the closet. The blush bridesmaid dress waited on one hanger, patient and optimistic. The charcoal suit waited on another, cut to my stride and lined in silk that never wrinkled. I chose the suit. Executive team to the presidential suite in 20, I texted. To Jessica, I need to speak with mom and dad. It's urgent. Please send them up. I promise I'm not hijacking your day. I'm trying to save it. They came in tight-faced and busy. They looked past Marcus and our department heads as if they were furniture, fixed their attention on me and started issuing more orders. The layout is all wrong, my father said before I'd even offered a seat. We need another 20 minutes of speeches. The risers are an inch too low. The chairs would be acceptable if they were a different chair. My mother held a swatch of ribbon like evidence at trial. This is ivory. We approved bone. I let them run out of steam. Then, because there are moments when you cannot manage around a truth any longer, I told them the thing I had never said out loud in their presence. Everything you've asked for, everything you've already received, every table moved, every dish replated, every extra hour, has happened because the people you're bullying work for me. I'm not here as a bridesmaid who wandered into a back-of-house problem. I'm here as the person responsible for every square inch of this place. My father blinked once, twice. He looked past me to the wall as if there might be a plaque that contradicted me. Don't be ridiculous, he said finally, pinning each syllable to a disbelief shaped like certainty. You're a hotel manager. Managers don't own international portfolios. I founded the company, I said. We acquired Pinnacle 2 years ago and rebranded. 15 properties. 3 continents. This one included. My mother sat down hard as if the chair had grabbed her knees. Her eyes tracked from the crown molding to the carpet to Marcus, to me. Since when? She asked softly, and there were 100 questions braided into the 2 words. Since you stopped asking, I said because I couldn't make the answer smaller without lying. Jessica appeared in the doorway with Brian behind her. Her hair was pin-curled and perfect, her face a timeline of emotions, joy, confusion, alarm. What's happening? She asked, and then, Morgan, why are you in a suit? Are you okay? I'm trying to make sure you have the day you deserve, I said, and for a second the whole room shifted to her and softened. Then my father broke the spell with the reflex he's never learned to interrupt. If you're attached to this place in whatever way you claim, he said, then we'll proceed strictly as clients. No special treatment. We expect standard remedies when standards aren't met. And since you've chosen to make yourself the story, I think it best if you excuse yourself. Your presence would make the family uncomfortable. He looked down, typed, and my phone buzzed. I didn't need to read it. I knew the cadence of his formal texts, polished tone over a sharp edge. I read it anyway. You're not welcome in our 5-star hotel. Please respect our wishes as clients. There are sentences you carry your whole life without realizing it. Sentences you build bodies around. For a long minute I looked at the words, felt the past unfurl inside my ribs, and then I realized there was nothing here I hadn't already trained for. Understood, I said. I turned to Marcus. Accommodate every reasonable request that doesn't collapse the timeline. Protect our people. And, effective at midnight, remove the Wellington family from VIP status. Standard access only. I faced my sister. Jess, I love you. If you want me in that room, I will be there. If you need peace more than my face, I will get out of the way and guard the perimeter. He swallowed. I want both, she whispered, and I felt the truth of her caught between 2 walls. But I can't fix them in the next 5 hours. I know, I said, and left the suite before my father could make a ceremony of winning. I spent the next 9 hours inside the engine rooms. Service hallways, radio chatter, war room timelines sprawled across whiteboards. Wherever the pressure bulged, we built a release valve. When my mother demanded orchids that didn't exist in this season, our florist built a monochrome miracle from peonies and garden roses and tied it with ribbon that matched the bone-to-ivory color nobody but her would ever parse. When my father decided to add a toast without warning, we found a microphone, a spotlight, and a manager with a smile strong enough to blunt any edge. When a groomsman misplaced his cufflinks, housekeeping located them in a laundry bag, hand-delivered, lint-brushed, and warm from the dryer like a kindness. At 3:52 p.m. the string quartet took their places. At 4 o'clock my sister walked down the aisle, and I watched from a camera I wished I were not watching. Her face when she found Brian was pure open joy. I stood alone at a console in a room with no windows and felt 12 kinds of love and pride and grief. At 12 a.m., the key cards updated exactly as instructed. The night manager, calm, precise, took my father's call and offered the politest no corporate training and a spine can produce. It didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like alignment. They wanted to be treated as clients. For once we were in complete agreement. The day after a wedding, hotels look like quiet aftermaths. Spilled confetti under sofas, a heel left under a table, a bouquet sleeping in a sink. I walked the ballroom at dawn with a cup of black coffee and a heart that felt like a room just after music stops. My phone chimed with gossip blogs spinning versions of what they didn't understand. Heiress band's parents from five-star venue. One headline announced, inventing a fortune I'd built instead of inherited and a choice I hadn't made so much as survived. Catherine let herself into my office with the code she'd had since the Archer days. She didn't ask if I was all right. She set a paper bag on the desk, bagels from the only place that understands salt, and waited until I remembered how to sit down. You were composed, she said quietly. You were fair. And you are bleeding inside. I laughed, a short, unsteady sound I didn't recognize. Is there a palate jack for that? There's a therapist for that, she said, unwrapping a bagel. And a friend who will put a calendar invite on your behalf if you stall. I didn't stall. I was so tired of being high-functioning and hollow. The first appointment was on a Tuesday at 7 a.m., because that's when people like me think we deserve help. Before anyone else wakes up, before the day can insert its claims. Therapy is a strange mirror. You sit in a room with a person who keeps returning your words to you, cleaner and heavier. I talked about thread count and balance sheets and service standards. She asked why 12-year-old me copied hotel floor plans and how I learned to explain myself only in metrics. I talked about controlling variables. She asked about being a variable in my own family. I told her I felt like a building with a perfect lobby and no kitchen. She smiled. Then we'll build one. Meanwhile, life continued with its beautiful, annoying insistence. Contracts had clauses. Payroll needed approving. Guests arrived with anniversaries, proposals, grief, and red-eye jet lag, and we did what we do best. We saw them. The work saved me when the rest of it threatened to drown me. And it changed because I did. I stopped running meetings like they were crisis negotiations. I delegated without writing the entire playbook in my head. I caught myself hand on phone at 2 a.m., composing an email to fix a detail that didn't need fixing, put the phone down and slept instead. I told my team to leave when the day ended and meant it, then tested my own instruction by walking out at 6:31 Thursday and taking myself to dinner without company or a laptop. The food tasted like permission. Jessica called from the airport on her way to the honeymoon. We're boarding, she said, breathless. Was it awful to watch? Be honest. It was beautiful, I said. You were luminous. I'm sorry I wasn't in the camera frame, and also, selfishly, not sorry because the way it happened would have swallowed you. You're better at boundaries than anyone I know. I'm learning them because I had none, I said. That's not expertise. That's survival. You can always call me and not be the CO, she said, and I felt another room open inside me, small but furnished, a space where I didn't have to be useful to earn the right to speak. Midweek, around lunch, I started sneaking small calls to the front desk just to ask how a particular guest's day was going. Not a mystery shopper exercise, a gratitude check. The teacher from Detroit who checked in on points sent her a handwritten note and 2 tickets to the museum. She's here because she loved the chapter our platform wrote into her classroom. Close the loop. In the past I would have done it for the optics. Now I did it because it fixed something in me to fix something for someone else with no press release attached. If you've made it this far with me, tell me in the comments the boundary you're learning to draw. At work, with family, with yourself. Someone scrolling through might need your sentence more than they need mine. Hit like if you've ever chosen your piece over your pattern. And if this story is living inside your ribs because you've been the responsible one long enough, subscribe. There's more I'm still learning to say out loud. My parents didn't speak to me for 9 days. On day 10, an email arrived from my mother with a link to a profile the journal had run about the Paris project and a subject line that read, simply, "We didn't know." No greeting. No punctuation after the period. Just a space and the quiet of a woman who had curated every RSVP list of her life and finally found her way to a door that required no guest list at all. "There is a lot we don't know about each other," I wrote back. "If you want that to change, I'm open to a coffee, somewhere that isn't ours." A week later, we met at a cafe with uneven tables and perfect pastries. My mother tried to make small talk about the server's apron. My father launched into a disquisition about municipal bonds, then trailed off as if he could hear himself from outside his body. We were awkward together, new to honesty. "I owe you an apology," my mother blurted finally, breathless as if she'd run to catch a bus. "Not the kind you give to end an argument. The kind you give because there's no version of the story where you behaved well." I didn't say, "finally." I didn't hand her a list. I said, "Thank you," and watched tears surprise her. My father cleared his throat. "You embarrassed us," he started, and I watched him abandon that sentence half-built. "Try again." "I embarrassed myself," he amended, and it was so uncharacteristic I had to look at him to make sure I'd heard him correctly. "I treated working people like they weren't working people. That's on me. On you and on where you learned it," I said, because therapy had taught me to notice the lineage without excusing the harm. He nodded once, the way he nods when he loses emotion he knew he would lose and knows opposing counsel earned it. "I read everything I could find," he said, almost shy. "I didn't understand the scale. I'm still catching up." "We don't have to do a lifetime in one coffee," I said. "We can start with one thing we both mean and go from there." The one thing we meant turned into small experiments. "Come see where I work," I offered, and met them not with press or a private tour, but with an hour in our training room watching a new hire session on the difference between service and servitude. My father asked questions as if he were cross-examining his own assumptions. My mother took notes like she'd decided to pass a test no one had assigned. We walked the back-of-house corridors with duct tape lines on the floor separating guest sightlines from staff staging, and I realized I wanted them to see the veins of the building, not just the chandelier. Jessica and I grew toward each other the way plants bend toward light. Slowly, then all at once. She texted me photos of her lesson plans. "The kids love the adaptive reading prompts your team built." And then one afternoon, a photo that changed all the math. A grainy black and white printout with the caption, "Hi Auntie. Come to Paris before the baby," I wrote back, impulsive and sure. "Bring mom and dad. Let me show you my world where I built it for beauty, not just survival." They said yes, almost to my surprise. I met them at the Wellington, Paris on a sun-soft morning that made the city look like it remembered its best era. I didn't orchestrate a grand entrance. I stood with a tray of espresso at the lobby doors the way a concierge would, the way I had at 19 when I wanted to memorize a language no one else in my family spoke. "This is yours?" my mother asked, eyes, finally, on the ceiling medallions and the curve of the staircase and the scent we'd blended in gross to smell like citrus and linen and new possibility. "Ours," I corrected. "Mine to steward. There's to conjure." I nodded to the team lining the desk and the bell staff and the attendants who had learned the names of every regular and the particular way a jet-lagged guest says, "early check-in," when what they mean is, "please see me." We sat in a training that afternoon with a cohort of new hires. I didn't make a speech. I listened while our head of guest experience talked about anticipatory care and hospitality as noticing. My father asked what happens when guests confuse service with permission. "Boundaries," our trainer said without blinking. "We give our people authority to protect themselves while they care for others." "Imagine that," I murmured, and my father's mouth twitched. The closest he comes to admitting a lesson landed. That night we ate on my balcony, the Seine throwing back the city's light like applause. My mother touched the linen napkin, the height of the candle, the butter's sculpted edge, her old habits looking for flaws, and then she dropped her hands and said, "I didn't believe you could do something like this because I didn't know a woman who had." "You do now," I said, and for a few beats we watched Paris make its case for itself. I thought the next pivot would be quiet. More therapy, more dinners without laptops, a foundation for first-generation hospitality students, the slow, nourishing work of building a life that doesn't have to be defended to be real. Instead, a letter found me, the embossed kind that telegraphs significance before you read it. Tourism Council, Advisory Seat, Public-Private Partnership, Vision for National Standards. 10 years earlier I would have accepted because it proved something. This time I read it twice, sent it to Catherine with the subject line, "Do we have capacity?" and to my therapist with the subject line, "Will this feed me or hollow me out?" It depends on your terms. They both wrote back in their own ways, so I made terms. I would accept if I could put workers at the table first, not last. If the agenda included language access, mental health, and a ban on "the customer is always right" as policy. They said yes. It felt like sculpture, cutting away everything that wasn't the thing I was trying to free. Back in Boston months later, we hosted an industry summit in the same ballroom where I had watched my sister's wedding on a screen. The city's old guard arrived with their lapel pins and their favorite stories, and I stood on the stage with a calm I had never owned before. I talked about the difference between luxury and generosity. I talked about how we train people to care without being consumed. I talked about how the right scent in a lobby can lower cortisol and how a well-run housekeeping department is a miracle disguised as linens. I talked about my grandmother, not the one in blood, the one I hired and learned from when I was 19, who taught me that real dignity is not making someone shrink to fit a door that should have been bigger. Afterward, my father texted me a sentence that didn't dress itself up. "Proud of you," it said. Full stop. No advice attached. That night I stayed late in the office not to work, but to watch the harbor do its dark glitter thing and think about how a person can be a hotel, public and private, polished and mechanical, always replacing the light bulbs. I thought about 12-year-old me stealing extra shampoo bottles and aligning them on a shelf like trophies. I thought about 30-year-old me in a suite with her parents, choosing a sentence that cost her a seat at a wedding and won her a seat at her own life. I thought about Jessica's daughter Lily, who had been born 2 weeks earlier and learned to decide who to smile at on day 4. I thought about the people who walk into our lobbies bone-tired and leave taller. I thought about the teams who make that height possible and how my job at scale is to build places where dignity is standard issue, not an upgrade. It would be clean to say the story ended there. Reconciliation achieved, business thriving, therapy doing its slow magic, Paris staged like a promise. But endings are not tidy. My mother still slips, sometimes, into appearance as morality. My father's instinct still leans toward leverage before listening. I still wake at 3 a.m. some nights and have to talk myself out of emailing someone a "just checking in" that is actually a "please tell me I'm doing enough." But maintenance is a kind of love. You keep showing up with a rag and a polish and a willingness to see smudges as proof that the room is being used. And if you're still here, if some part of this feels dangerously familiar, tell me where your story bent. Drop a comment with the sentence you wish someone had handed you when you were 19 or 29 or yesterday. Like this if you've ever learned to build a door where there wasn't one. Subscribe if you want the last piece of this arc. The boardroom where I said yes on my terms, the apology I didn't think I'd ever hear said out loud in a room that used to make me small, and the 8-person table in a kitchen that finally felt like home because nobody had to earn their seat. Before we go there, one more scene. A Tuesday in late fall. The lobby smelled like oranges and wool coats. A guest approached the desk with an expression I know too well. The mix of exhaustion and effort that says, "I've rehearsed my complaint so I don't cry while I tell it." Her room wasn't ready. Her suitcase had a broken wheel. Her conference had moved her breakout to a basement that didn't exist. I watched our agent lean forward with the kind of attention that rearranges weather. "We've got you," he said, and meant it. Within 5 minutes, the room was ready. Within 10, a Bell team member had repaired the wheel with a tiny screw that lives in a secret toolkit. Within 15, the conference team had created a basement out of a top-floor salon with blackout shades and a noise machine. No one knew the owner was in the lobby, and I liked it that way. The work was happening because the work is our culture, not because I was watching. The guest exhaled like she'd put down a backpack she'd carried across a country. She looked at the agent and said the quiet, perfect sentence I chase in 1,000 forms. "Thank you for seeing me." I turned toward the door with the kind of light inside that makes chandeliers unnecessary and thought, this is the only legacy worth insisting on, places where people are seen without having to make a case for themselves first. And that, I think, is what I've been building all along. The day after that lobby moment, the email about the advisory seat moved from my think folder to my answer now list. I wrote back with conditions that would have made 20-something me worry I was overplaying the hand. A wage floor tied to cost of living, paid language stipends for multilingual staff, a mental health benefit that actually funded therapy, not just an EAP pamphlet, and a formal retirement of the phrase, "The customer is always right" from every document we touch. Replace it with, "Everyone deserves dignity." If they wanted the Wellington name on the masthead, they would get the Wellington standard as policy, not marketing. They said yes. Not because the old guard suddenly found religion, but because tourism needed a new story and ours made economic sense. Fewer injuries, lower turnover, higher satisfaction. Hard to argue against math that makes money and people both safer. The first meeting was held in a municipal room with carpet that looked older than my career. A half circle of executives in thoughtful navy, a row of city officials who wore their constituents' exhaustion in their posture, and a scattering of small business owners who had given up a day of revenue to be heard. I opened not with a deck but with a name. Carmen, 20-year veteran of events, the woman my father had humiliated the morning of Jessica's wedding. I explained her craft the way a sommelier explains terroir, the geometry of tables that prevents bottlenecks, the choreography of service that keeps council water glasses full without interrupting a vow or a verdict. Then I said, "We keep telling people like Carmen to treat guests like honored humans. Let's write policy that treats her like one." Predictable pushback arrived on cue. "Margins," said a legacy owner with cuff links older than my graduate interns. "If you raise wages, prices go up. Or turnover goes down," I countered. "You already pay for churn in training, mistakes, and reputation. Let's pay less for people to stay." "I don't see why the city should referee culture," a council member added, skeptical and tired. "We referee traffic," I said. "We build crosswalks where people get hit. This is the same. We're building crosswalks." By the end of the session we had a pilot. 5 properties across the city, anonymous to one another, adopting the same bundle of changes for 6 months. We'd track everything: injuries, sick days, departures, guest scores, profit. We'd publish it public even if it made certain donors squirm. I donated the analytics team from Wellington and forbade them from smoothing anything that didn't fit our thesis. If the data contradicted me, I wanted to see it. My father came to the third meeting, an unannounced presence in the back row, hands folded like he was observing opposing counsel. At a break he approached our sign-in table, picked up a lanyard and said to the volunteer, "I'm not on the list," the way men of his generation apologize with 3 words instead of a sentence. The volunteer looked at him the way hospitality looks at everyone. "We can fix that." She wrote Harold in careful block letters, handed him coffee, and asked where he'd flown in from, as if all arrivals are brave. He listened while a housekeeper described the new ergonomic carts that meant she could get home without fire in her lower back. He listened while a concierge explained our boundary script for entitled behavior. He listened while a night auditor talked about the mental toll of being the only person awake in a building of 1,000, and how the new overnight check-ins in pods of 2 had cut the lonely in half. He didn't speak, but every so often he nodded, tiny motions like ballast shifting. 2 months later, the pilot data came in like a wave and did what clean numbers always do: cut through noise. Injury claims down 43%. Voluntary turnover down 37%. Guest satisfaction up 9 full points. Revenue per available room up 4% with no increase in average daily rate. The newspaper ran a piece with the headline, "Dignity Pays," and for once the comments were more grateful than cruel. "You're good at this," Catherine said after the press conference, like she hadn't been the first person to tell me that when I was 19 and handing out room keys and second chances. "I'm not good at this," I said. "We are. The staff are. I'm just loud with a microphone." "Own the part you played," she said, maternal and sharp. "Then go eat something green." I didn't expect what came next: an invitation to testify at the State House on a bill that would spread the standards statewide. The room had the gravitas of a courtroom and the acoustics of a church. The committee chair asked me to explain hospitality as public good, in 5 minutes or less. I did it in 4, because service is timing, and yielded the rest of my time to Alicia, who described the day she watched my parents walk through our Boston lobby and chose grace over pride. I watched aides stop typing and look up. When the hearing ended, my father was waiting in the marble hall, hands in his pockets like he needed to keep them from saying the wrong thing. He didn't clear his throat. He just began. I owe you an apology, he said, voice steady, not performative. Not for the policy disagreements. For the way I taught you to measure yourself in rooms like this. I told you your work didn't count because I couldn't see myself in it. I was wrong. I made you earn your welcome in places where you already belonged. That wasn't rigor. That was cruelty dressed as standards. The apology landed like rain in a dry field, and I stood very still to let some of it soak. Thank you, I said. I didn't think I'd ever hear that aloud. You are better at this than I was at my best, he added almost to himself. And, God help me, it is a relief to admit that. We were quiet together, not the brittle quiet of our old dinners, but the kind where no one is holding their breath. After a beat he smiled, small, unfamiliar. Your mother wants to cook. I didn't know that was allowed, I said, and we both laughed like the sound had been on backorder for 30 years. We set a date for a dinner that would have terrified us a year ago. My place, one long table, 8 seats. I wrote the names on cardstock like I write room names on plans. Mom and Dad. Jessica and Brian. Thomas, finally stepping down from his high horse long enough to walk inside. Catherine, because you seek your origin story where everyone can see it. Sebastian, because he is the person I am learning beside. 8. I did not hire a chef. I did not stage my home like a showroom. I made the playlist myself and burned the bread once and laughed about it. I set the table with linen that had survived restaurant-grade washing and a centerpiece from the flower market that looked slightly too wild for magazine pages but exactly right for a room where we were going to tell the truth. Jessica arrived first with Lily asleep against her chest and the face of a woman who had laughed enough that day to earn the quiet. I brought an insurance policy, she said, kissing my cheek. In case the conversation needs a topic everyone in the room agrees is perfect. Thomas came next, contrite in a suit he didn't need to wear. He looked around at the art he recognized from articles he hadn't read when they came out and said, I'm sorry I've been a stranger to the version of your life that actually exists. Thank you, I said, not making it bigger than it was. My parents arrived with salads wrapped in damp towels like they were transporting small weather systems. Mom took in the kitchen, the multiple cutting boards, the labeled jars, and I watched her decide to be a guest instead of an inspector. Tell me where to stand, she said. Then tell me what to do. Stand there, I said, and be my mother. We ate too much and stayed too long at the table the way good nights ought to go. There were tense moments. Of course there were. Old grooves call to you. Thomas asked a question that sounded like a cross-examination until Jessica touched his wrist and he asked it again like a brother. My father started a story with "in my day," and corrected to "I used to think." My mother caught herself about to praise me for a salad like a hostess prize and instead said, I love the way you make rooms feel. Catherine told the story of the first time she saw me de-escalate a lobby meltdown. Sebastian told the story of the time I made him stop drawing to eat real food and he realized that partnership without caretaking isn't partnership. We passed the baby around and nobody argued about who held her how long. At some point the playlist ended and the room kept its own rhythm. In the space after dessert, no cake, just peaches and cream and spoons, my father raised his glass and for once I didn't brace. To the person you were when we didn't see you, he said. To the person you became when you refused to disappear. And to the person you are now who didn't make annihilation the price of boundary. I didn't toast back. I didn't make it a ceremony. I said, thank you, and cleared plates because ordinary dignity is my favorite kind. Work meanwhile kept evolving because I did. The council made the pilot permanent. Other cities called. We open-sourced the policy toolkit. Checklists, training scripts, wage calculators, sample schedules. Competitors downloaded it. I didn't mind. The point is dignity, hoarding is a sin. At Wellington, we launched the foundation I'd sketched on a napkin after therapy session 3. Scholarships for first-gen hospitality students whose families said be a lawyer. Microgrants for side projects that improve staff lives. A night shift breakfast cart. A locker room upgrade designed by the people who use it. A quiet room on every property where a human can close a door and breathe. We created a sabbatical program for 10-year staffers with options to study anything. Pastry in Paris, Spanish in Oaxaca, no justification required beyond curiosity. I shifted my calendar like a tectonic plate. One day a week became meeting-free, not to catch up, but to be in the buildings. Not surprise inspections, surprise conversations. I carried a stack of blank cards and wrote notes. You changed the temperature of a whole room with how you greeted a family who hadn't slept in 2 flights. Thank you. You chose safety over speed and turned a problem into a process. That's leadership. I sent checks for unexpected bills staff couldn't cover and made sure they arrived with no strings and a line that read, "Because you matter to us." The romance between Sebastian and me did what healthy things do. It got less cinematic and more durable. We learned each other's pressure points and made room around them. When he traveled for a week to oversee a restoration in Lisbon, I didn't fill the silence with work until it swallowed me. I texted him photos of the dinners I cooked without burning the bread. He sent me sketches of cornices and street dogs. We didn't make grand declarations for anyone's camera. We made the bed together in the morning and washed the dishes at night. Jessica's baby Lily grew into the absolute conviction that everyone is thrilled to see her. In our lobbies, that worldview is mostly accurate. On the day she visited the Boston property for the first time, she toddled straight to the front desk, pressed both hands on the marble and announced, "Hi." The agent bent down to eye level, which is the angle dignity often requires, and said, "Welcome home." I had to turn away for a second and breathe. As for my parents, our progress wasn't linear. It was honest. My mother still texts me outfit photos with the caption, "Is this too much?" And I still reply, "Too much for who?" My father still occasionally offers advice about contracts I've already negotiated, and I've learned to say, "Thanks, Dad. We've got our counsel and I'll tell you how it turns out." We still mess up. We still repair. There is no finish line for people trying to be new in rooms that made them old. But there are checkpoints. And we keep making them. Months later, at a national summit, I gave a keynote I'd been avoiding writing because I wanted it to be important, and important is the enemy of true. I told the story of the night my keycard software revoked a set of privileges and my nervous system revoked a set of permissions. I told the story of my therapist asking me who I was when no one needed anything from me and me answering, "Hungry." I told them about the lobby guest and the miracle of a man at a front desk saying, "We've got you." I finished with a line I'd been saving for when I had earned it. Luxury isn't a price point. It's the absence of humiliation. After, a bell captain in a too large blazer stopped me in the hallway, tears bright as if the building itself had turned into a mirror. "I didn't know anyone in rooms like that saw us," he said. "We do," I said. "And if I'm doing this right, there will be more of us in those rooms." When the conference ended, the board chair of the council pulled me aside. "We'd like you to lead the National Standards Task Force," she said. This time I didn't ask my therapist if it would hollow me out. I knew my terms by heart. I accepted on them. On the flight home, I put my phone on airplane mode and for once didn't immediately open a spreadsheet. I looked at photos instead. Jessica and Lily asleep on my sofa, my mother laughing with a pastry bag in her hand, my father in shirt sleeves teaching a group of interns how to argue without making people small, Catherine with flour on her shirt from the time we made pizza badly and ate it like it was the best thing we'd ever cooked, Sebastian, eyes crinkled, one hand out of frame where it must have been holding mine. I landed to a text from Marcus, "Guest at the desk. Long day. Team handled it." She said, "Thank you for seeing me. Thought you'd want to know." I closed my eyes and let the message settle into the corner of my chest that used to be all ambition and is now mostly gratitude. If you're still here, if some part of your story rhymes with mine, drop a line below with the smallest place you made better because you noticed. Someone will read it at 2 a.m. and keep going. Tap like if you believe boundaries are a love language. Subscribe if you want more true stories about building success that doesn't require a costume change to be a human being. And if you're the person who needed to hear this sentence today, here it is. You never had to earn your welcome. The work you do to make rooms kinder counts, even if the first room you ever stood in couldn't see it. The people who couldn't imagine your life are not the ones who get to measure it. I still walk lobbies. I still check sight lines and scent levels and whether the welcome fruit looks like it wants to be eaten rather than photographed. But I also check the break room chairs. I listen for laughter that doesn't sound brittle. I watch for managers who know the birthdays of the night crew. I look for the quiet miracle. A person in a uniform and a person in a suit meeting in the middle with their shoulders lowered. On a Tuesday that smelled like rain and citrus, I saw a father and daughter stand under the Wellington canopy, arguing gently about whether to use an umbrella. He handed it to her and got wet himself, and I thought about all the versions of father and daughter I had lived through to get to a canopy where we could both be ordinary, which is to say safe. The doorman opened the door because that's what we do, and I went inside to write a policy, to sign a scholarship letter, to eat something green, to answer an email from a college student whose parents think her dream is unserious, and to tell her that sometimes the most serious thing you can do is build the place where everyone finally fits. If you're watching this on a phone, somewhere between your own lobbies and kitchens and break rooms, know this. You are not a misfit. You're a prototype. The day will come when someone asks you to write the manual you had to invent. When it does, don't make annihilation the price of entry. Make dignity the standard issue. And when you walk into a room tonight, any room, try this. Look for the person whose job is to make the room work, and let your face say what your words should mean everywhere by default. Thank you for seeing me.